So I'm curious to know what definition of atheist you're using. As you know, there's probably like different definitions that people use when they use the atheist label.
Mm-hmm.
When you say that you don't have enough faith to be an atheist, which definition are you using?
Well, the title is playing off the traditional sort of definition that people think faith means. Faith, they think, means when you don't have any evidence, you just believe it blindly. That's what the title is using. But that's not the definition of faith. The real definition of faith is trusting in what you have good evidence to believe.
Yeah.
So we're just playing off a title. So traditionally, atheists have said, I believe there is no God. There are some atheists now saying, I just lack a belief in God.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a cop-out, and it doesn't say anything about the real world. It says something about the atheist psychological state, but it's not saying anything about whether or not God exists. So I don't think that's a good definition of atheism.
Yeah. So I am one of those atheists that would say I lack a belief. I'm not willing to say I know there's no God. Am I exercising faith? Would you say?
Well, let me ask the question this way then. Here's the proposition. God exists. Do you agree with that proposition? Do you disagree with that proposition? Or do you not know?
I don't know.
Okay, so you're an agnostic then.
I'm an agnostic atheist.
Yeah, agnostic. You don't know.
Initially, the guy said he lacked a belief in God, but when Frank pushed back, he eventually admitted that he didn't know if God existed or not. Now, that's an intellectually honest position, and an honest person would be a seeker, and they will follow the overwhelmingly convincing evidence that Jesus Christ lived, died, and was resurrected from the dead. They will follow the evidence where it leads. Now, let's see if this is a intellectually honest person.
Yeah, agnostic. You don't know.
Yeah.
An atheist would be someone who says, I'm pretty sure there's no God. An agnostic says, I don't know. Could be, maybe not.
I don't know if follow-ups are allowed, but in the book, you acknowledge that there's not perfect evidence, like there's not enough evidence to be perfectly sure there's a God. But you're still justified in being theist because there's enough evidence. Yeah. So that would be an agnostic theist, right? Somebody who doesn't know but believes. Would you allow the same for an atheist to say, I'm not convinced that a God exists, but I'm not saying that I know there's not?
Well, I think the preponderance of the evidence beyond, for me, a reasonable doubt is that God exists. Could I be wrong? Of course I could be wrong. We could be in the Matrix, right? There's no way of knowing we're not in the Matrix. You got to get outside the Matrix to know that. Now, I just think that's silly, but it's possible.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you then, if historic Orthodox Christianity were true, would you become a Christian?
Define Christian. like
following Jesus' commands and trusting in him for your salvation. Jesus said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments.
Yeah. I would say I would need more information. I would become...
if it were true.
Yeah. I'm saying then it would depend on what his commands are, whether I agreed with them. So I don't think it's...
Wait. Sorry. So you're saying if God existed and you disagreed with his commands, you wouldn't...
Yeah, of course.
You would go your own way?
Of course.
Okay. God gives you the free will to do that. But is that a rational position?
I think so.
Why? How?
As a hypothetical, if he asked me to murder my son, I wouldn't do it.
Okay. And?
So I think that's rational to disobey if he asked me to do something.
But if you knew it was God?
Yeah, even if I knew it was God.
And you knew that God could resurrect your son?
Yep.
Notice at first he framed his position by saying he doesn't believe there's enough evidence to believe that God exists. But when Frank asked him if God did exist, and he asked him to sacrifice his child, knowing that he has the power to resurrect life, God is there, he said he still wouldn't follow God's commands or do what he says. He still wouldn't follow God. This proves that this is not an evidence issue, but a heart issue. You see, a lot of atheists believe they are more moral than God, but they don't have a moral standard without God.
I think that's rational to disobey if he asked me to do something.
But if you knew it was God?
Yeah, even if I knew it was God.
And you knew that God could resurrect your son?
Yep.
See, the whole Abraham thing is a foreshadowing of Jesus on the same mountain, Mount Moriah.
Mm-hmm.
And God stops Abraham, but he doesn't stop Jesus from being killed because Jesus is the sacrifice. He's the lamb.
Mm-hmm.
But is God going to ask you to kill your son?
No, it's just a hypothetical.
Yeah,
I'm just using it as
but given where we are now, we're past all the revelation in that regard. Yeah. If it were really true that Jesus is the Savior and loves you and wants to have a love relationship with you, would you enter that love relationship and accept what he's done?
Again, I think that I need more information about whether, like, what he's asking you to do and whether I agree with it. But I would, of course, believe in God if I was presented with enough evidence.
Okay, so if I gave you a book, would you read it? Because he already has one.
What? The book? This book?
This book? Yeah,
I've read it.
Or Stealing from God.
I've read this one. I haven't read Stealing from God.
All right.
I'd be willing to.
If I gave it to you?
Challenge accepted.
Okay, beautiful.
This is the perfect example of a hard heart and a blinded mind. The idea of having a love relationship with Christ didn't move him because his heart is hard towards God. And despite knowing that God has the power to resurrect life, he would still willingly disobey God because he believes he is his own moral standard. His mind is blinded. He and many others are fulfilling prophecies like this. Matthew 13, 14, and 16 says, "Indeed, in their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled that says, you will indeed hear, but never understand. You will indeed see, but never perceive. For this people's heart has grown dull. In their ears they can barely hear, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear." For some people, all we can do is pray that God opens his eyes, his ears, and softens his heart, and be all the more grateful that God did that for us. A true atheist will admit there is no purpose, hope, or rationality in atheism, even morality.
Why am I here? Well, what do you think? Is there a reason we're here? Do our lives have any real significance?
Well, that depends.
On what?
On whether or not God exists.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that my life has no significance because I don't believe in God?
No, not at all. I'm saying that if God doesn't exist, it doesn't matter what you believe. Our lives would have no objective meaning, value, or purpose. Many atheists themselves recognize this. If atheism is true, life is absurd.
Okay, and why do they think that?
To begin with, if God does not exist, then the physical universe is all there is. Which means you and I are just accidental byproducts of nature.
Right. So?
That means we were not intentionally designed. So there's no purpose for us being here.
Whoa.
It gets worse. If God does not exist, there is no absolute standard of moral value. You've heard of Richard Dawkins, the atheist. He points out that in a materialistic universe, there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pointless indifference.
So you're saying atheists can't be good people?
No, I'm not saying that. Many atheists live good lives. What I'm saying is, atheism fails to provide an objective basis for saying any particular action is good or evil.
Oh, come on. After millions of years of sociobiological evolution, humans have developed a sense of morality. We all know it's good to feed a hungry child and bad to torture someone for fun.
Of course we do, but that's precisely what atheism cannot explain. If there's no God, then what we consider right or wrong is nothing more than an accident of evolution or a human social convention.
So what? I'm good with that.
Really? Evolution implies survival of the fittest, not morality. And social convention means that racism, intolerance, and cruelty are not really wrong. They just happen to be unpopular.
Okay, so atheists need to come up with some objective standard for rights and wrongs. How about this? If an action leads to human flourishing, then we can say it's objectively good. And if it doesn't, it's objectively evil.
But why think that human flourishing is good? Aren't you being species-centric? Why not refer instead to the flourishing of rats or cabbages?
Well,
And who gets to decide what contributes to human flourishing? Hitler was convinced killing millions of Jews would promote human flourishing. And Margaret Sanger thought forcing poor people to be sterilized would lead to human flourishing. As Guy Nielsen points out, pure practical reason will not take you to morality. So if atheism is true, there is no legitimate basis for saying that behaving one way is worse than behaving any other way. So it really doesn't matter how you live your life. Your day-to-day choices are meaningless.
That's depressing.
So if there's no God, what happens when you die?
Well, nothing. You simply cease to exist.
Right. So one person lives a kind, generous, thoughtful life. Another lives a horrible, violent, selfish life. It doesn't matter. In both cases, the outcome is the same: nothingness. So how can their life choices have any objective meaning?
Well, it's certainly meaningful if I discover a cure for cancer or save a child's life.
I agree completely. But atheism can't explain why. Scientists predict that eventually the whole universe and mankind with it will die out. So everything comes to nothing. That's why atheist Bertrand Russell says we must build our lives on the firm foundation of despair.
No thanks. I'd rather live a happy life.
You're not alone. Every atheist has to choose between being happy or being consistent. You can tell the whole world you're an atheist, but you can't really live like one.
There is none of that, because if there is no objective standard by which those things are grounded, they're based on individual subjects. I just find it funny that a person who lacks a belief in God has a lot of opinions and beliefs about what he would do with that God. If you enjoyed this video, you want more content like this, do me a favor and like this video and subscribe to this channel. I'll be back next week with another one. This is Pastor Frederick. This is About a Book. Peace.